That's just one of the changes on full display from this morning's Buff Diver Mega Patch. And I've only had a few hours to test out just a few of these changes, but from what I've seen and I'm now reading about, we are so fucking back. Welcome to the channel. This is LtBuzzLitebeer, and if the Steam player counts are any indication just how interested divers are in what Arrowhead has been cooking, it shows. As it's only 9:30 here in the morning, East Coast US, many players aren't even online. They're at work right now, and as you see, those numbers don't lie, and they just keep on climbing. But enough of that. Let's talk X's and O's, because there are a mountain of changes to talk about. Some you already know about. Some, like that Thermite grenade, were just a total surprise. And some I don't even see listed here. But before we dive into all of this, thank you so much for your awesome and continued support. The channel just keeps on trucking, and I owe it all to you. In case you haven't done so already, take just a moment to hit subscribe and to ring that notifications bell so you never miss one of my future uploads. And here it all comes, and I do mean all the latest with Helldivers. All right, very quickly over to the Galactic map, and there is no current major order running right now, which I expect we will get a little later today. And also, the daily or personal order is to kill 50 enemies with the 380 barrage, which of course, once completed, will net you 15 medals. Oh, and also, I've seen this comment a few times. No, the new War Bond does not launch today along with this patch. It will come out in 2 days' time on Thursday. So, not today. Wait 48 hours. It comes out on Thursday. All right, over to those patch notes. From here on in, I'm just going to be reading directly from the patch notes and, of course, interjecting my thoughts along the way. Just sit back, listen to my voice, enjoy some of the footage. This is going to take us a while, but it says, "Thank you for your valuable feedback. Many players have expressed feeling constrained in how they approach the challenges, often relying on a limited set of tools while other options seem less effective." I guess that's an accurate summation. That was pretty much Helldivers. "This has impacted your ability to play the game in a way that suits your preferences." So, what's changing? For all the bug divers out there, many situations were previously either resolved with your primary weapon or anti-tank weapons, which haven't always performed as expected. Again, that's accurate. With the overwhelming presence of Bile Titans and Chargers, many weapon choices therefore became invalid. Once again, perfect summation. To address this, we've reworked armor pen, anti-tank weapons, enemy armor, and health values. All four of those we knew about before today. Our goal is to improve the effectiveness of weapons such as the autocannon. Dude, they love that autocannon. Heavy machine gun, flamethrower, and AMR, or anti-material rifle, against heavily armored enemies. Although they may not be as effective as specialized anti-tank weapons, they are now more viable choices, making your loadout more versatile, fostering better team collaboration and planning. So what they're saying there is the anti-tank weapons are still going to be kind of the meta against heavily armored enemies, but they're also adding into that category as additional options autocannon, HMG, flamethrower, and AMR. On the bot front, so listen up all you bot divers, Hulks have also had their armor reduced, making them more vulnerable to a wider range of weapons. Additionally, to improve the gameplay experience, the Devastator and Gunship will now have a limited supply of rockets. Remember, those were the rocket devs that we're talking about, and those rockets won't hit as frequently as before. This comes alongside the previously updated smaller impact radius for rockets, reducing excessive ragdolling. Probably the biggest, or one of the two biggest issues we have with the bots, right? Just the excessive ragdolling. Now, if they can get those out of control lasers traveling through cover, that's probably the second biggest. We've also made improvements to many primary weapons, bringing them closer in effectiveness to the most popular choices. They should have just said the incendiary, breaker, and sickle, but there you go. This should offer more variety and flavor during your play sessions, which we wanted. More variety, more insanity, more chaos equals fun. We are adjusting damage mechanics to make the damage Helldivers receive more consistent over time by reducing, whoa, am I reading this right? 100% extra headshot damage down to 50%. They came out of the gate swinging. This is an unpublished change. We had no idea this was coming. This is massive. This is going to greatly reduce those just awkward, just getting folded moments. It's because we're getting tapped with headshot damage and those headshot damage multipliers. They've cut it in half down to 50%. Massive, massive change. Should allow us to stay alive longer, especially versus the bots now. To maintain the overall challenge of the game, they've also slightly increased the damage taken to other parts of the body. Arrowhead, missed opportunity here. Please, mods, please, devs, include those percentages as well. It's good to know. My arms are going to take 25%. My legs take 30%. My torso takes 40%. Maybe my head 50%. Give us the breakdown. Maybe even show us, an outline of a body and show us the body parts as far as the damage multipliers go. Our intent is to preserve the intensity of the gameplay while minimizing frustrating situations where sudden headshots cause large damage spikes, which we've all experienced, once again, versus the bots. They continue on. We want to assure you that your feedback remains essential to us. Please share your thoughts on these updates as we are actively listening. We plan to conduct another balance pass by day 60. I'm going to have to look that up on my calendar. How many days are we into this 60-day plan? I'll do that right at the end of this. Of our commitment to ensure we're aligning with what you need for the best possible experience and to address any concerns or adjustments required. Your insights will be invaluable in refining these changes and making sure the game remains engaging and enjoyable for everyone. So kind of the normal spiel there. And as promised, I took to Google. The original 60-day announcement was on August the 13th. Today is September the 17th. That's exactly 35 days. So Arrowhead has 25 more days to run this second balance patch to kind of bring any outliers from what they buffed back into more alignment with what they're trying to do. So 3 weeks. After that initial volley, they dive straight into general balancing changes. These are huge. They don't look like much on paper, but when I explain them, you'll understand why. It says previously, partial damage dealt 50% of full damage. What are they talking about here? Enemy armor penetration, and specifically, enemy armor pen on a 1-to-1 value. You're shooting a weapon that has light armor pen at a target that has light armor. 50% of that round's potential damage is stripped right off the top as it passes through that enemy armor, and only 50% lands on the other side and does damage, which they found to be overly punishing and reduced effectiveness too much, leading to an excessive reliance on high armor penetration weapons, which makes sense. We're always trying to exceed the enemy armor values. We've now increased partial damage to 65%. So they moved it from 50% up to 65%. And I anticipate it's way more than just 15% net addition on the other side of what that round's going to land of full damage to address this issue. So keep in mind, that's not just weapons. That's also whatever sort of airstrikes you're bringing in or orbitals or anything like that. They're going to pick up a ton of damage as well. So our weapons and all of our strats, that is a massive, massive change. They also say the Helldiver now takes less damage from headshots, which they already said, which previously dealt 100% extra damage, but now inflict only 50% extra damage. So that extra headshot damage spike has been cut in half. That's going to keep you alive a lot longer. Damage from hits to other body parts has been slightly increased depending on the area hit. Again, we don't see any specifics here. That's a miss there from Arrowhead. This adjustment aims to normalize overall damage while maintaining detailed damage zones, reducing spike damage. So far, I like what I'm seeing. We've got this massive and sweeping change to enemy armor pen, and trust me, you're going to feel that the second you log into the game. We also have this 50% reduction in those massive damage spikes we were taking from headshot damage. That's going to keep us alive a lot longer. However, we're picking up a damage modifier against us for all of our other body parts. Again, no percentages here, which the more I think about it, yeah, I think we divers can probably live with that as long as we can dish out as much damage as we take. I think all of us can live with that. So let's next move on to the primary weapons, and there's a ton of changes here, starting off with the LIB and the LIB carbine. It says damage is increased from 60 to 70. Okay, durable damage also increased from 14 to 17. Stagger force increased from 10 to 15. Trust me, divers, you want more stagger force on your weapons. That's a solid change right there. Max spare mags increased from 7 to 8. All right, and starting spare mags increased from 5 to 6. So, first question of this, what's going to end up being a very long video, viewers. Are these changes, the damage, the durable damage, the stagger force increases, the extra mags, is that enough to attract you away from whatever your favorite primary is to try out the Liberator and the Liberator Carbine? Make sure and leave me some feedback on these two. Let's move on. Next up is one I think we've all forgotten about. I personally had, the Knight. Damage is increased from 50 to 65. That's more significant than what we saw on the Lib and the Lib Carbine. Durable damage increased from 5 to 7. Mags now fully refill when picking up resupply, and reduced recoil. All right. Next is the Liberator Concussive. Now comes with a drum mag, which holds 60 rounds. Wow, what a dramatic change there. Yeah, it definitely needed a lot more ammo, and a lot more ammo without a reload. It just needed to be able to shoot a lot more rounds downrange. Well, here it is. Number of mags reduced from 10 to 6, which is obvious because you're picking up drum mags now, which hold 60 rounds, and the number of mags have been reduced due to the larger mag capacity. Listen up, all you Tendy rockers out there. The Tenderizer number of rounds in its mag increased from 30 up to 35, and the starting magazines increased from 4 to 5. So it looks like in a kind of a roundabout way, they're reverting those previous changes they made to take available ammunition away from the Tendy. The breaker changes we already knew about. Johan and Nicholas already advertised them. Now comes with an extended magazine which holds 16 shells. Stagger force increased from 10 to 15. That stagger force increase is definitely what you want. Not immune from the Buff Diver update, the Breaker S&P shows up here. Now has a duckbill muzzle, making it spread very horizontal but less vertical, so you can get into those swarms and just spray and hit a wide arcing radius from side to side. Also, total damage increased from 192 up to 240, so two very significant changes for all you Breaker S&P users out there. Next up is the Scythe, and we already knew about these changes because they were on Johan's patch notes in one of the previous announcements, but the cooldown is faster. That means you're going to be able to get back into the fight faster and put those lasers down range. Adjustments to the heat VFX, okay. Scope changed to a low-powered scope. Removed, not just reduced, removed recoil. All right, so now it's an official laser beam, sets enemies on fire faster. With that reduction or removal of recoil and the cooldown faster, this is going to be a really strong and possibly sleeper weapon versus the bots. I definitely want to try this out, and especially if it sets enemies on fire faster. Let's talk explosives, and we're looking at the crossbow. Explosion radius increased by 50%, and check this one out. Explosion damage increased from 150 up to 350. Those are both massive buffs to the crossbow. Another advertised change, but here it is confirmed. We're talking the Eruptor. Shrapnel projectiles amount are set to 30. Shrapnel damage is set to 110. Explosion damage decreased from 340 down to 225. And then it says shrapnel is back. We heard your feedback and reintroduced the shrapnel. They just keep saying shrapnel. We have replaced the original shrapnel with the frag grenade shrapnel to no longer instantly one-shot Helldivers, with the exception of the occasional unlucky headshot. If I'm not mistaken, frag grenade shrapnel is light armor pen. We also increased the amount of shrapnel. Explosion radius increased by 33%, 17% for inner radius, and 50% for outer radius. Of all the weapons I've discussed so far, the Eruptor is probably tops on my list of the weapons that I want to try out in the game. This thing was a beast at launch. I want to see how close it's come now back to being the OG Eruptor. The Defender is next on our radar. Damage increased from 70 to 75, so modest change there. Durable damage also increased by 1 point from 7 up to 8. The Liberator Penetrator, another weapon I never use. Damage increased from 45 up to 60, so significant buff there. Next to the DMRs, the Diligence. Damage increased from 125 up to 165. Durable damage increased from 32 to 42. Okay. I might actually use the Diligence now, but now the DCS is next. Listen to this. Damage increased from 140 up to 200. Durable damage increased from 14 to, listen to this, 50. Durable damage increased from 14 up to 50. Damn. Stagger Force also increased from 15 up to 20. Yeah, the DCS is definitely going to be in my loadouts from now on. The Blitzer, my personal favorite that I use out on the bugs, now has a weak stun effect that builds up per shot on its target. I also used it this morning. The electricity coming out of the weapon definitely looks to be a little more stunning, at least it did to me. And finally, we're talking the Torture. Big changes here. Damage increased by 50%. I mean, that's significant right out of the gate. Flamer mechanics reverted to before the escalation of boredom update. What does that mean? Fire is going to pass through armor. It's going to touch the exposed bits behind. And breaking news here, they increased the armor pen on the Torture from 3 up to 4, making this the first AP4 primary we've had in the game. In the interest of time, I'm going to blitz through these 3 sidearm changes, starting off with the Peacemaker. They've increased the max spare mags up by 1 from 5 to 6. The Dagger mimics the changes to the Scythe, gains heat more slowly, removed recoil, damage increased from 200 up to 250, sets enemies on fire faster, and adjustments to the heat VFX. And finally, the Crisper is going to mimic the Torture. They've increased the damage by 50%. Flamer mechanics reverted to before the EOF update and increased AP from 3 to 4. That's right, you've got armor pen 4 on a sidearm. Oh yeah. How about those big boy weapons? Let's next move on to support weapons. And the Arrowhead devs kind of break these out into 3 categories: the strong and reliable, which are like the RR8, the Spear. You've also just got strong, which are the expendable anti-tanks and quasars, and then you've got the less strong, which are things like the Commandos and the Patriot exosuit rockets. So here's the first change: the grenade launcher. Starting spare mags increased from 1 to 2, max spare mags increased from 2 to 3, and explosion radius slightly increased. All positive changes for the GL. It needed more ammo, it needed more AoE. It gets both. I liked this weapon before, I'm going to like it even more after. Next up is one of my personal favorite weapons to rock versus the bots. The LC, the laser cannon, is beast over in Botsville. First off, the cooldown is now also slightly faster. That's going to equal raw DPS. Removed, not just reduced, removed recoil, turning this thing into a freaking laser beam. Sets enemies on fire faster. Love that change. Can now damage heavier enemies like Chargers and Bile Titans, Impalers, and Hulks. I think it could damage Impalers and Hulks before. I'm pretty sure of that. But now we add on Chargers and Bile Titans and adjustments to the heat VFX. I love what I see there with the LC. I tried out the arc thrower this morning. Range increased from 35 to 55. We already knew about that. Now has a moderate stun effect that builds up on its targets, jumps additional times. Durable damage has been doubled from 50 up to 100. Next up, everyone wants to hear about this one. Everyone wants to try this weapon out. The Railgun, I tried it this morning. It's an animal. Durable damage increased from 60 up to 225. Holy hell. Fully overcharging damage increased from 150 up to 250. This thing was smoking targets when I wasn't even up to 100% overcharge. It's an animal. Next up is the Stalwart. I love this, especially for chaff. Damage is increased from 60 to 70, so it picks up a little bit there. Durable damage increase, also just a little bit, 14 to 17. Stagger force increased from 10 up to 15. Like I said earlier on, you want more stagger force on your weapons. Here, it's getting a pretty sizable change there, and I'm definitely going to keep rocking the Stalwart. The machine gun also picks up stagger force, increased from 15 up to 20. The AMR, we've heard about this in the past. Here are the changes. Durable damage increased from 135 up to 180. Can now damage heavier enemies like Chargers, Bile-Titans, Impalers, Hulks. Stagger force also tacked on an additional 5 there, from 20 to 25. So the AMR went from really good to even better. Heavy machine gun, love this weapon. Stagger force increased from 20 up to 25. Can now damage heavier enemies like Chargers, Bile-Titans, Impalers, and Hulks. I thought it could damage all of those, besides maybe Bile-Titans. Next up is the Commando, and this is overall a nerf for this weapon. Demolition strength against structures has been reduced. It can no longer destroy automaton fabricators in a single shot. However, since the Fabs now have health, it can still take them out with 2 shots. So it used to be able to do it in 1, now it's 2. That's the change to the Commando, and we just learned that automaton fabricators now have a health bar to them. Very interesting. Flamethrower is next up. We already knew about this. Damage increased by 33%. Flamer mechanics reverted to before the Escalation of Boredom update. Increased armor pen, so just like the Torture, they increased the AP from 3 up to 4. Can now damage heavier enemies like Chargers, Bile-Titans, Impalers, and Hulks. And finally, the autocannon rifle can now damage heavier enemies like Chargers, Bile-Titans, Impalers, and Hulks. So massive changes there to our strat weapons. We picked up a lot of stagger force there. We picked up some durable damage there. And we picked up the ability to use these weapons versus heavier elite enemies that we haven't had that option in the past. I love the changes that I'm seeing there. Besides the Commando, I think they should have left it how it was before. Even the grenades have been touched here in the Buff Diver update, starting off with the Frag. Shrapnel damage increased by roughly 50%. Wow. Max amount increased from 4 to 5. I guess that's what we can carry. Refills increased from 2 to 3. And explosion radius increased. That sounds good, but listen to this next one. And this is what you saw in the opening clip. The Thermite grenade. Make sure you're sitting down for this one. Explosion damage increased from 100 to, take a guess, 2,000. Yeah, that's right. Explosion damage increased from 100 up to 2,000. Shorter time until it ignites the Thermite. Time until it explodes slightly reduced. Max number decreased. That's how many you can carry, from 4 down to 3. And as you saw in that opening clip, just slap one of those onto a Charger, give it a little bit of time, and kablowie. One shot, they are down. Massive change to the Thermite in this one. And in terms of general gameplay changes, the new Galactic War feature, the Galactic War map can now display the location of strategically important assets. When you hop onto your maps now, take a look at them. There's definitely some different graphics showing up. This will make it much easier for the Helldivers to take them into consideration when deciding on their next move. And also, we got an emote wheel feature. Players can now equip up to 4 emotes in the armory and access them using the new emote wheel featured by holding the emote button. Additional separate key binding options are available for the emote wheel in the settings, and they also added on Dolby Atmos support on PS5. At this point, you're probably asking, but what about the enemy changes? Well, they're next up, and they are aplenty. Starting off with the aforementioned automaton fabricators, which sounds like they get a buff because they now have health and armor in addition to their existing destruction system. This means that while many high armor pen weapons can still destroy them, it may take multiple hits to do so depending on the weapon used. And we heard about the Commando just a few seconds ago. They also added effects to clearly showcase the health state of these automaton fabs. So overall, it sounds like the fabs got a buff. I'm gonna have to test them out, but yeah, it looks like they got a buff here on paper. Moving along to the actual enemy variants, all versions of the Hulk's armor reduced from 5 down to 4. Back weak spot, slightly more durable. Back weak spot health decreased from 1,000 down to 800. So if you get on their backside, you can hit those vents, drop them just that little bit faster. Hulk Bruisers are next up. Replace the rocket launcher for an energy-based cannon. Wow, that's an interesting change there. They also increased how frequently the Hulk Bruiser shoots that cannon, so we definitely got to be careful with that one. The Automaton tanks, front armor increased from 5 up to 6, so they get a buff. Berserkers, head health reduced from 150 down to 125. Main health reduced by 250 from 1,000 down to 750. Abdomen is now a weak spot. Okay, and the chainsaw damage has been increased. Well, at least you gave us a weak spot to hit. Now, if we could just hear those chainsaws when they're running at us so we can tell when they're getting close, that would be helpful. Next up are all the versions of the devs. Those Devastators, main health reduced from 800 down to 750, so slight reduction there. Devastators now flinch when hit, causing their aim to worsen, similar to the conscripts. The intent is to make them easier to manage if you keep applying damage. I'll have to test this one out. I know that I frequently take the autocannon rifle in versus the bots, and I will pop these devs from distance. They're just getting bashed all over the place, and they somehow seem to land perfect shots on me. So it's saying here that they flinch. I'm going to test that one out. Sticking with the Devastators, and now specifically talking about the rocket devs, we already knew about these changes, now has a limited number of rockets, and you can see them visibly disappear when they're spent out of the launchers up on their shoulders. Added a reload mechanic from their backpack to replenish their rockets once. So they get a full reload once. Rocket physics collision is smaller, making them easier to avoid. Same thing basically with the gunships. Gunships now have a limited amount of rockets. Rocket physics collision is smaller, making them easier to avoid. Let's talk the Charger, all versions of the Charger. There's a ton of changes here. Listen to these. Armor, like the Hulk, has been reduced from 5 down to 4. The butt weak spot health is decreased from 1,100 down to 950. That's a pretty sizable change there. The butt weak spot is also slightly less durable. The belly armor has been reduced from 4 down to 2. A damage multiplier has been added to the Charger's exposed flesh of the main body, now dealing, listen to this, 300% more damage. They now turn slightly slower when charging and moving normally. They now charge less often, but listen to these two things. The charge damage they do is increased by a whopping 50%, and the side attack damage they do is also increased by that whopping 50%. That's where they stop and kind of rear up and slap to the left or right. Yeah, that's also been buffed by 50%. The Charger Behemoth, the butt weak spot health is decreased from 1,200 down to the same 950 as all the Charger variants. The Hunter has had its health reduced from 175 down to 160. The Scavenger's health reduced from 80 down to 60. That's even more significant. Bile Titans, everyone's favorite. Armor reduced, just like those other elites up there, from 5 down to 4. We have reworked the Bile Titans belly gameplay. Belly armor reduced by 2, from 4 down to 2. Wow. Introduced a separate belly health pool once the outer belly layer has been destroyed. Man, I need to find one of these and just stand underneath it and do some testing. And also destroying the exposed belly health pool kills the Bile Titan, where it wouldn't in the past. The Impaler also gets some pretty significant changes here. Armor, like those other heavy elites, reduced by 1 from 5 to 4. Previously, the Impaler could only retract its tentacles once during its entire lifetime when threatened. Now it can do it several times. Yay! More tentacles coming up out of the ground and slaps coming down on us. Its tentacles pursue you over a shorter distance, though, from the Impaler and prioritize players nearer to the Impaler. If the Impaler can't see any enemy, it will retract its tentacles after a brief period. And finally, those tentacles themselves, the Impaler tentacles. Tentacle damage is increased. I don't know if that's our damage versus the tentacles or that's their damage hitting on us, but it says tentacle damage is increased, reduced camera shake of the tentacle attack. The tentacles require less damage inflicted on them to retract. So massive sweeping changes there listed across the bots and bugs, especially having to do with those elites. Definitely leave me some feedback on those. I know some of you are going to be talking to me about the Charger Behemoths, the Chargers, those Bile Titans, Hulks, and of course the Impalers. I'm sure I'm going to read lots about all of those, but definitely looking forward to that feedback. I know I told you up front this video would draw on for a very long period of time, but we're near the end of the patch notes. I told you there's just a lot here. We need to finish up with the stratagem. Starting off with the Eagle 500 kg, the explosion radius has been increased to better match the visuals. The Eagle rockets, damage slightly increased. Love the Eagle rockets. Gatling Sentry, also love this strat. Stagger force increased from 15 to 20. Machine Gun Sentry, also stagger force increased from 15 up to 20. More stagger force in the game is great for us divers. Tesla Tower, which I've used about as many times as I can count on one hand, increased stagger force to match other arc weapons. Now has a moderate stun effect that builds up per hit on its targets. Heavy machine gun emplacement. Love this strat, by the way. Stagger force increased from 20 up to 25. Can now deal damage versus heavier enemies like Chargers, Bile Titans, Impalers, and Hulks. Here come the exosuits. Gatling Stagger Force, this is the Patriot exosuit, has been increased from 15 up to 20. That's the only change on the Patriot. The Emancipator autocannon durable damage increased, listen to this, from 60 up to 150. They've over doubled the durable damage. What's that mean? You're going to hit those heavier elite enemies like those Chargers, like those Bile Titans. You're going to do a lot more damage to them. Rate of fire on its weapons also increased from 125 up to 175. Ammo increased from 75 to 100 per arm. Damn, I'm going to have to give the Emancipator another go, especially versus those heavy elites. Orbital laser, damage slightly increased. Again, no percentages. Orbital rail cannon, damage slightly increased. I mean, that thing was already pretty strong to begin with. Orbital gas strike, we are reworking the gas gameplay mechanics to become more crowd control focused in preparation for the Chemical Agents Warbond. That's all it says there. The gas effect has been reworked to cause blindness and confuse enemies and Helldivers alike at the expense of reduced damage over time. So, wow, that sounds like a complete rework of the orbital gas strike. And we're down to the last 3 areas of the patch notes that we need to mention here at the end of the video, and we're technically only going to cover 2 of these. First off, planets and modifiers. Listen to this one, divers. This is a wild rework of planet conditions and modifiers. The intense heat and extreme cold modifiers are no longer static. That means they don't stay constant throughout your mission, and they may now change based on time of day or different weather conditions. Wow. Talk about immersive. Some desert planets will now only have the intense heat modifier active during the day. This means that during the night, the planet will either have no modifier or in some cases have the extreme cold modifier. What does that mean? Maybe you hit a mission and it's daytime and you've got the intense heat modifier. Of course, your weapons build up heat faster, but then the night cycle comes. It goes to extreme cold. That means they build up heat slower, but that also means your rate of fire is slower. So you kind of have to adjust your gameplay just a little bit as the day-night cycles change on the planet. That's cool. Arid planets, similar to the Hellmire planet, God, I hate Hellmire, will now only have the intense heat modifier active during fire tornado storms. Listen to that again. Arid planets, like Hellmire, will now only have intense heat during the fire nados, not full time. So massive rework of planets and modifiers there. I love those changes. That adds some immersion to the game. It makes us think just a little bit. I really appreciate that. Next up, and I just can't cover all of these in the video. This would be an entire another video, or all these miscellaneous fixes and crash fixes. Things like the evacuate high value assets objective, they've adjusted that one. Geological survey missions, the Impaler has had a bunch of fixes done to it. Things like the HMG scope is no longer misaligned, fixed lens cutting issues in scopes. I also read in here they fixed some issues where the automatons were actually shooting through cover. That's somewhere down here. I don't even remember where it was. There's just so many of these things. So I'll definitely flash them up on screen and hopefully you'll see them right now. But once again, the link to all these patch notes can be found down in the video description. Definitely go check it out and see if your specific issue for the game is listed out in there. But like I said, it's just scroll after scroll after scroll of these fixes. And we're finally at the end. Woo. This is the longest Helldivers video I've ever done. I've used the most slides I've ever used in a video. I want to briefly mention the known issues board because they've changed it up. They've actually split it up into top priority issues and medium priority. Of course, in top priority, what are we looking at? Things like friends request, large enemy units that have no audio cues. They simply emit no sound. They can walk up on you, they're completely silent, and they just start bashing you. Enemies trying to shoot the gens through the walls in the rescue high value assets missions. Enemies are sometimes capable of shooting through walls. I would say and modify that sometimes to many times capable of shooting through walls. We see things like the social menu. Please wait democratically. Dead bodies of chargers launching Helldivers up into the air, which is actually kind of fun. Stratagem balls bouncing unpredictably off cliffs and some spots. So yeah, kind of the same old, same old. The greatest hits there are listed in top priority. Everything else that they had is now listed down in medium priority. And I would keep going. I know the new major order just launched. This video is far and away long enough, so let's just go ahead and call it quits right there. Remember to hit subscribe and to leave me any feedback you have about any of these changes down in the video comment section. And of course, while you're at it, ring that notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. All my socials, including all of my links to my sources, can be found down in the video description. Shout out to we're now running up on 244,000 of you maniacs from across the globe who've taken the plunge, you've hit subscribe, and you tune in on the daily to support me and my content. You are all incredible, and I lean on that support hour by hour, day by day. It's just awesome to see. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, about to go take a nap, signing off.